So, leadership, always talked about, very rarely seen. An issue for me, which is extremely significant, is values. To what degree is leadership value driven? How clear are leaders at any level about what's important to them, what distinguishes them from others? So I'm going to go through just 6 questions here that touch on, but far from fulfill, the whole issue around this. So here we go. My first question is, are values-driven leaders more effective than those who are not? My flip answer is, surely they are. They've got to be. But are they really? Is there a greater value in being agile, is a current word, to be inconsistent in your practice? And maybe a value is to be reactive rather than to be totally consistent. To be fluid is a value, perhaps, of greater value than always applying the same way of working. I'm thinking about this as I'm speaking. This is one of the values of doing these recordings. So the question, are values-driven leaders more effective than those who are not, to me is out there. I kind of intuitively believe they are. It'll take more thought from me to be totally convinced of that. Secondly, and that's probably true of all of these to a degree, how many leaders are explicitly clear about their personal values? What does explicit mean? It means going beyond thinking and feeling to knowing. And the best way for me to get leaders to be explicitly clear about their personal values is to write them down, to type them up, to say, whoa, so that's what I think is it. Because for as long as we don't do that, we haven't truly explicitly unpacked the thoughts and the distinguishing, differentiating ideas that mean that we go about leadership in a different way to someone else. And making that explicit to me is powerful, because to actually see in front of you words, not just thoughts that say, this is why I go about leadership in this way, to me that has a lot of value. And it could be something that more leaders could think about. Third question, what are the individual versus organizational issues? There are too many to go through, and what I'm deliberately keeping to a short recording here. What are the individual versus organizational issues? Well, organizations provide the context for leadership, and values-driven leaders that are explicitly clear about their leadership style, method, preferences will either fit with or contrast with and have tension around organizational issues. Surely it's impossible for absolute harmony of values between an organization and an individual. That's asking probably too much. And organizations are not democracies. I understand that. I do feel, though, that a lot of leaders, the more clear they become about the way they go around leadership, will find they are in direct opposition to some degree with the culture, how things are done around here, of the whole organization or that unit in which they operate. So that leads me to the fourth question. Are values statements, here we're talking organizational, slogans, or are they authentic in practice? Organizations over the past X years have seemed to develop an appetite for espoused values. You see them on reception areas, you see them in columns and buildings and on walls in organizations. All work in the same organization, no one's more important than each other, all this sort of stuff. To me, they're just slogans a lot of the time. And leaders with values might well be saying to themselves those are the explicit values of the organization. I don't see them. I'm going about things in this way. The reality is that leaders with values will need to be aware of the true values of the organization, either as a whole or the part they're in, and to a degree modify their practice within that, because to get things done, you've got to some degree comply with how the organization is going about things for real, not just how it says it's going to. Which leads me to number 5. Are values dynamic? How often should they be revisited? To me, values are dynamic. They reflect changing times, changing selves. The leader themselves is evolving, one hopes, learning things, adapting to new challenges and new roles. So values that are static, values that are purely organizationally the result of a very expensive day, or at most two, with a very expensive consultant deciding around the table what the values of the organization are, of many thousands very often, without any consultation with people within them, all too often, that's rubbish. Those values that might have been done 15 or more years ago, have they been revisited? Have other such meetings or a better process been entered into? To me, values should be a constant dynamic. They should be saying, how different are we in this organization, and how differently do we need to go about things for real? And real values can take a difficult reflective exercise. Let's not come up with all these positive statements to say, hey, look how great we are. Let's actually accept, either as an organization or as an individual, that we ain't perfect, that there are things we need to do better, and that our value statements need to reflect that. I don't think value statements mean much when they're not revisited, updated, modified, and reflect current times, either organizationally or individually. So in this short overview, my final question is, what are the observable indicators of a value-driven leader? Values, plural, driven leader. What are the observable indicators of a value-driven leader? Well, they must be out there, and I know they're out there. I'm not going to try and answer that question. It's too difficult, and of course, it's organizationally contextual. But surely there are observable indicators of a values-driven leader. A values-driven leader goes about the role of leadership in a different way. I wonder what those ways are, and I really won't try and answer the question, but there are, from what you see, ways that distinguish leaders behaviorally from those who are not values-driven. A values-driven leader should be consistent in practice, surely, should be driven by certain explicitly known, differentiating ways of going about the role. That's well worthy of a revisit, but I'll leave it hanging out there for anyone to answer for themselves. I hope that helps. To me, values matter. Values, particularly when known, can help a leader be more effective than one who just floats about doing things ad hoc and reactively.